Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Lucas Porwell, and welcome to this DG.O 2020 session. You are most welcome. As you know, the DG.O is supposed to be in South Korea. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, we all know the pandemics, it's now online. And this actually created, I think, an opportunity for us because this work, as you can see from the title, is about virtual reality. And we felt like, why not to talk about virtual reality inside virtual reality? So this work in particular look at the principles of dialogue and VR affordances to ensure better communication that would help the existing participation to achieve VR participation. And what I mean by VR participation, it's a term I coined several years ago. My idea was that this new means of participation deserves a term on its own, and it's not only extended e-participation, it's fully immersive e-participation, which kind of creates a completely new paradigm of communication between citizens and the government. With a lot of implications. Therefore, I believe it deserves a separate term that I called VR participation. And what are the key research questions here? We have two research questions here. I will take the virtual pointer to show you. We have two basic questions. One is whether the affordances that virtual reality has can help implementing dialogue and online and support better consensus building. And if that is true, can this VR dialogue actually help e-participation to achieve effective VR participation? Yeah. So first of all, whether VR can afford dialogue, and second of all, whether this VR dialogue can ensure effective VR participation. Yeah. And in terms of focus, so this is basically, we look at dialogue and virtual reality as means of helping a participation. In terms of methodology, we have two basic blocks here: dialogue and VR affordances. Dialogue, we look at the literature, extensive literature in dialogue and communications, and we look at the principles of dialogue, and that would match our use case. And then finally, we look at specific VR literature on communication in VR, and specific VR affordances that would allow implementation of dialogue principles. So we elicit specific principles from dialogue literature, and we look at how certain VR affordances can support those principles. That led us to constructing an integrative framework, combining those two, and which is basically a VR-mediated consensus and community building achieved by implementation of dialogue principles. And that leads to a more effective e-participation, VR participation. Okay, so that's our intention. If we talk about dialogue, dialogue is something different from discussion and from argumentation. Dialogue is a very effective way of conveying conversation to achieve constructive results. So in argumentation discussion, one side tries to convince another side that they are right. So you have some specific viewpoint, another person have another viewpoint, and they, let's say, argue or exchange arguments. So if we talk about dialogue, it's very different from our argumentation or from a discussion. Nobody tries to convince anybody to a specific viewpoint. It's not about winning. It's not a win or lose game. Here, a person starts with a viewpoint, another person has another viewpoint, and then collaboratively they arrive as a new distinct viewpoint, which is different from the initial viewpoints of other parties. Yeah, so it's all about collaboration, co-creation, and arriving at the new viewpoint that will be the efficient result of the conversation. Okay. And then in terms of specific dialogue principles we look at in our work, we look at O'Neill, who refined the principles of dialogue from Bohm and refine it with principles from Isaacs. And we have participant, coherence, awareness, and unfoldment. and then refined principles: listening, respecting, suspending, and voicing. We believe the latter one is kind of more intuitive for us. So this is the one we use in our framework. And what does it mean? For instance, listening, respecting, suspending, voicing. These are the core elements of the conversation. And so, for instance, now in terms of setting like we have now, it's a presentation, you're listening, I am talking. So this is listening stage now. Yeah, you give me, I'm privileged now because you are listening to me and I talk and I convey some truths here, and you are respecting my position, my privileged position now to talk, and you also are considerate of me, and you suspend your opinion, so you're not shouting at me now or disagreeing. You are waiting for the voicing stage, and the voicing stage in this setting would be the question and answer at the end of the session, or real session if we had one, so that even if you strongly disagree with what I'm talking about here, you would suspend it till voicing. Also, suspending and voicing is kind of entangled or kind of an aspect of, it introduces an aspect of mindfulness. So before you voice your opinion, you kind of check with yourself whether what you want to say, is it really constructive? Does it contribute to the result of this conversation, or I'm just trying to vent my emotions, my anger, or other feelings? And if you can do this quick check and you realize, okay, this doesn't really help, then you can suspend it indefinitely, or you feel like you will wait for the voicing stage, and then you will try to convey your honest opinion, while others will also respect you and listen to you. So in this setting, like now, presentation like, this is just one cycle, let's say. We progress from listening while respecting to suspending, and then finally voicing at the end. But if you have setting in the boardroom, that will go in cycles. So for every person, at some stage, somebody would be voicing, the others would be listening and respecting, maybe suspending in the meantime, and then, the roles change, and another person is voicing their honest opinion, and other people would listen and respect, and maybe suspend in a mindful way what they try to say, keeping it for later, or suspending it indefinitely if it doesn't contribute to the discussion. Yeah. So that's the model we used. We also look at the dialogue games, and I use this picture intentionally because dialogue, as I mentioned, it's not about winning or losing, but I think it's about arriving here at the common strategy. That's why I felt chess is a good example. Basically, in dialogue games, people try to implement dialogue in a conversation, online conversation. And you can see those kind of systems where you have very structured conversation, which has very strong protocol that does not allow kind of free talking, which can lead to, let's say, unconstructive comments and abuse. So one of the elements that you can see currently on social media from dialogue games would be on Facebook. Like if you post something, and somebody puts a comment, they can comment, and then the following person can either comment to the original post or reply to the comment. That introduces extra structure, and that should lead to a bit better, more constructive result. But that's just one element implemented from dialogue games. Dialogue games are so much more, but we will not focus on this in this presentation, dialogue games. But we also look at principles coming from dialogue games in our framework. And in terms of specific VR affordances that we extracted from the literature, and we believe are pivotal for ensuring that dialogue can be implemented, is immersion, presence, and sense of community. Immersion, you can see this guy here is totally immersed, literally. He cannot see the world around him. Presence is me now being here, right? I'm here now with you discussing or presenting our work. And then finally, sense of community. And in this setting is easier because we are all at DG.O, a conference, or we are members of DGS. We're all friends, colleagues. It's easier, but VR can support assembly or creating a community for people who don't know each other. And I will go into detail in a very in a minute. So in terms of immersion, Immersion is a system property. It's all about performance, about VR equipment performance, about hardware performance. What does it mean? I'm using a VR headset, which is tethered to a computer. Oculus Rift, which is a popular platform. It's probably one of the most performant ones. You have standalone headset like Oculus Go or Oculus Quest. So the graphics will be a bit less on those platforms, and the frame rate, the tracking will be slightly slower. And therefore, the immersion can be slightly less. Oculus Quest is a very nice trade-off. I would say it takes from both worlds and also gives you freedom. It's not tethered. So the immersion can actually be even maybe stronger than this system. But what I want to say is it's purely a system property. The better the tracking, the more immersed you are. What does it mean? Our brain is very sensitive towards lagging. A lag in vision, for instance. So if I move very fast in my head and there will be strong lag in the vision, I will disconnect from this reality mentally. I would not feel this is real. And I'll be reserved towards this reality. And in extreme cases, people can get sick, right? So your brain can receive this lag as a warning that you ingested the poison, and it can make you feel bad, basically to remove the poison. And so there's a good research on that. So the better the performance of the system, those effects are less. So you are much more believing in this reality if the system performs smooth than you would if it's clunky, if it's stopping. In extreme case, it can lead you to kind of emotion sickness, right? So this is important in terms of immersion. In terms of presence, this is at the level of hardware as well, but goes more towards software. What I mean here is, and also actually methodology inside the VR. What I mean here is about user experience and stimulation. Presence is how do you experience the technology that makes you immersed. Yeah, it can be a bit individual and people can react differently. So I'm strongly present here because I have smooth vision tracking. I can move my hands. I can walk around as I walk in real. I walk in VR. I can go down. I can go up. That gives me kind of better sense of presence here because my actions in the real world are reflected immediately and smoothly in this world. But also it goes to senses. So I have spatial audio covered which preserves physics of the real world, sound diffraction and direction. And this, like, for instance, if I, and then software, for instance, now I'm looking at you now, right? But if I look away, you know, I'm not focusing on you. Also, if you had VR headset, you would know that voice would be different. Yes, so if I'm facing you, the voice is different. So the sensoric experience is important. There is a simulation of touch in those devices. So, for instance, if I touch this podium here, usually, dependable on experience, you can feel like vibration controllers. So that gives you kind of a haptic feedback, which is important, making you feel this is a bit more real. Or if you touch somebody, you can have this little buzz there, and it kind of imitates, or it's a substitute of touch. So this is like, let's say, off-the-shelf solutions. But if you go more into it, there are solutions that simulate touch with special gloves or generate smells, fragrances, feeling of wind breeze, of cold, heat. So some things you can attach to your headset. Like if we finish this conversation and went out to the park, you can see it's behind this venue. Then suddenly I would have a blowing cold breeze on my face, and that would make me more present. So while immersion is purely hardware and the performance of the system, presence is actually the user experience and stimulation. So the user experience with this technology, especially the sensoric experience, right? So the more senses covered, the better they are covered. That should induce better individual user experience, hence the feeling of more presence in the specific environment. Then finally, the sense of community. I mentioned here in this setting, it's easier. We know each other, or we know most of each other. We are a community of colleagues, people of DGS interested in these specific topics. But in principle, you can have people coming from different domains, and they come to this space. And how does VR help? How does VR help to create togetherness? So, yeah, sense of community is a social property. Yeah, it goes beyond the system performance and beyond the software. I would say VR in VR, it's mostly supported by software and methodology. So there is kind of a gradient here. Immersion is about largely about hardware. Presence is about software, and then sense of community is at the edge of software and specific protocols and engagement strategies implemented. To picture that, I can say I have been organizing meetings for participants of MIT Reality Hack. So we have our reunions every so often, and I figured that the best way to engage people, to make them feel together, or basically team building effort, is to put some basketball rack and make people throw balls or compete with each other. That supports community building. And the reason for that is like that was a huge event. There was over 500 participants, and those people who come to the reunion, they might not even met each other before. So we still need to have some kind of engagement, and the basketball seems to work very well. And there's other interactive tools that you can bring in VR to make sure that the sense of community is better and can build up over time. So in this sense, I would say the sense of togetherness. So sense of community is a social property, and the sense of togetherness can be built or supported by specific interactive software tools inside the virtual reality space. And finally, this is our model. And you can see those principles I discussed before. We have listening, respecting, suspending, and voicing. And we can see how those principles of dialogue are supported by those specific VR affordances, immersion, presence, and sense of community. How does this framework contribute towards implementing VR for e-participation, or how to implement next generation e-participation as VR participation? Well, if we look at, let's say, listening, you, for instance, you use the existing social VR platform to implement VR participation. Like I'm using now, I'm using Outspace VR platform, and yeah, we have those elements here, all the building blocks. We can start actually trying to do VR participation, and you can see that, for instance, people are not listening. You are having an experiment, or you have actual session, and you see people are not listening. People are looking away. People are, maybe also talking. They are not really focused. That means that there is a problem with immersion, and you can support that by ensuring that people are using high-quality hardware, which is fast, which is smooth, so that they can isolate much better from the reality, and they can really focus. They can focus on being here. So that can be supported by improving on the infrastructure of the participants. Then in terms of being considerate about the other participants, so being mindful, suspending your opinions indefinitely, or waiting for the voicing stage. You can, for instance, detect that there is lack of being considered to others. Then there's a problem with presence. How you can improve that? Well, you can again try to improve in terms of the hardware infrastructure, get maybe more better controllers, gloves, something, or you can try to look at the capabilities of the specific environment. And for instance, you can maybe again make sure that people are stimulated more. Yeah, audiovisually, and maybe through other means, triggering as many senses as possible. And so this is more, again, as I mentioned, the software level. You try to fine-tune the environment to make sure people are sensorically stimulated at all times as much as possible, so that they feel really present here, not in their apartment or their house or wherever they are. And then they will be once they feel more present, they will be more considerate to other people because they say, okay, they are really in front of me. And then finally, if you, for instance, realize that there is lack of respect, so people are arguing or abusive, that means there is a problem with the sense of community. And the sense of community can be, again, improved if you change this environment to include some interactive elements, engagement elements. I mentioned like basketball was one of it for MIT guys, but maybe there can be something else for different groups that will trigger people, that will engage them, that will make them collaborate, some social games. I don't know, even having a little cafe or a bar here in the back may actually spin team building. So again, aligning your virtual space, virtual environment, and maybe applying some team building strategy in VR, which is possible to enable more respecting, and that will definitely, again, help the community building and having this sense of togetherness, okay? And now if we look at how does this relate to VR participation, the e-participation, well, this all supports serious communication in VR. And if you have constructive conversation, that's what we want in e-participation. We want this engagement between citizens and decision makers to be fruitful. So this is important to e-participation, next generation e-participation. And if we can implement this dialogue the way we described, then we will have quite efficient tool to connect citizens and decision makers in a way that was not available before. And to do that, you can use existing social media platforms already, like Altspace VR, which I'm using currently now to record this presentation, delivered by Microsoft. There is also a platform from Mozilla Foundation, Mozilla Hubs, that runs in browser in any device. We have an upcoming solution from Facebook called Facebook Horizon, which is anticipated a lot because it's integrated, should be integrated with Facebook platform. So there's things you can choose from and build your environment for socializing or for serious conversation, like now, you know. So or for city hall meetings, for governance. You can develop different scenarios and different environments fitting that purpose. So I would argue, of course, this research presented here is limited. The main goal will be now the main next step would be to engage with citizens and decision makers and organize city hall meetings, engagement sessions, and see how this works if we try to manipulate those factors to ensure better immersion, better presence, and better community building. And we can see how different elements shape the conversation and shape the community. So that will be our immediate step. And for that, we will use one of these platforms and fine-tune them using all kind of interactive tools, different environment venues design, and see how well we can convey the message and how well the participation can go on. So that will be the next step. And yeah, that's all in terms of this presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Now we are opening the voicing part, which is question and answer. So please feel free to ask me now. You can answer through this VR interface now, cannot ask me, but you can put your comment below somewhere on Discord. Just put your comment with mention of my name. So you put @ and Lucas Porwell, and then I should get a notification, can reply directly to you. And you can also like my video. So it's somewhere, there's a burger like icon somewhere on the side or on the left, right. You can like me. Yeah, you can like my presentation. I think that'll be quite a reward for me, or seeing your approval, peer approval of my presentation. And lastly, you also can notice that in the channels in Discord, there is a VR channel. So Mozilla Hubs and the Discord, they're both made by Mozilla Foundation, supported by Mozilla Foundation. So we have them integrated, and we have a social space there. So if you wish to try a bit the VR, whether you have headset or just a Mac, a laptop, or mobile phone, you can enter, and we will have some social events there. But I will also try to have a little live session where I can also do a live presentation of this kind, and we'll see how it's gonna go. So I will try to do this presentation maybe again in VR space. So if you're interested, stay tuned and you can drop me a line. So thank you very much. And that was Dr. Lucas Porwell from DG.O 2020. Looking forward to for your comments now. please comment below, and I can't wait to know your opinions and your suggestions for our research. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.